It's that time of year again. Winter has melted away, the temperatures are rising into the double digits, and, well, we've spent so long in hibernation that we're probably all ready to start soaking up the sun again. But shining not so brightly alongside the sunshine are, well, pretty damning clickbait headlines. Hello everyone and welcome to another RCI Science video. I'm Celia Public Engagement Officer at RCI Science, and today we're going to take a look at what the internet has to say and ask about sun care and skin cancer. And here to help us wade through the weeds is dermatology physician Dr. Danny Mansour.
Hi
Welcome,
there.
Danny.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Dr. Mansour, or you can call me Danny. I'm one of the dermatology resident physicians here at the University of British Columbia. I'm originally from Ontario, a little small town called Windsor. I'm sure some of you know it, by Detroit. And then I did my medical school in Toronto for 4 years, and now I moved all the way out to the West Coast to complete my residency training. So I've been very fortunate to get to live in some really fun cities in Canada, and it's been a blast.
Yeah, cross Canada experience.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so let's get started. In our research, we've actually stumbled upon more than a few questionable headlines we were hoping you could help us interpret.
For
So,
sure.
thank you. Our first headline is Why Men Are More Prone to Sunburn Than Women. So, yeah, does the sun discriminate?
I mean, you know what? It does and it doesn't in some capacities, right? I think one of the most important discriminating factors when it comes to the sun is just our basic biology. So, it's our skin type. Some people have lighter skin type than others, and we do know that those with lighter skin type, the classic blue-eyed, blonde-haired, or the ginger green eyes, they're more at risk of skin cancer just because their skin has a tendency to burn when exposed to sun for a longer period of time in comparison to those who have darker skin types. Now, with regard to sex differences, a lot of that comes to just social behaviors. And, anecdotally speaking, depending on what certain people do with regard to their job, men tend to be shirtless a lot more often, might be engaging in some work that's outdoors and exposed to the sun on a more regular basis. And, not to call shade, but how many guys love to put on some sunscreen? Like very few, not that I know of. Whereas in general, again, this is a generalization, but I think in general, women tend to be a bit more conscious about sun application. Oftentimes, much of some of the makeup has a little bit of sun protective factor in it. So all those little factors kind of can help contribute to why, in general, sometimes we see skin cancer a little bit more prevalent in men, and that is true. And skin cancer is on the rise. And part of that is, in part, we're probably spending a little bit more time outdoors. We're probably spending a lot more time kind of traveling, maybe not in the last 3 years on sunny destinations with COVID, but prior to that, and certainly now with restrictions kind of easing and us kind of settling into a new normal, people take a lot more sunny getaways. We have our classic snowbirds who go for the winter to Florida, Miami, Palm Springs. And it's just more easily accessible. So a lot more cumulative sun exposure and therefore a lot more skin cancer in general. And we're just better at detecting them, as a dermatology resident, as a resident physician and as dermatologists. Our technology has certainly changed in the last 30 years. So we're able to detect melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancers a lot more readily than we used to in the past.
That's really great to know. A lot of different factors at play here. And since you brought this up, actually, what is the difference between melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancer?
Yeah, no, that's another great question. So melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancers, they're just all different types of skin cancers. So I think melanoma is probably the most well-known skin cancer. We all think about it. It's that people know pictures of it. It's dark, it's irregular. That's the thing that people worry about when they see a spot on their body. But then we also have a subset of skin cancers called null and melanoma skin cancers. And these include things most commonly known as basal cell carcinomas or squamous cell carcinomas. So, on a biological standpoint, it really depends on kind of the cell of origin. These are actually very, very common. Basal cell carcinoma is one of the most common cancers worldwide, if we really think about it. Basal and squamous cell carcinoma is, depending on how early we detect them, they tend to have not as many negative sequelae in comparison to melanoma. I think that's the one we're always really, really worried about.
Right.
But in general, all skin cancers, whether basal or squamous or melanoma, are super important to be mindful of and to bring attention to your medical care provider, your dermatologist, just to take a look at them.
All right, that's good to know. Really good information. So let's just jump into our second headline. Banning sunbeds would save thousands from deadly skin cancer in UK, study shows. And this is kind of, I think, where we get a lot of the conception that, getting a base tan, for example, at a tanning salon can protect you. So what's the science on this?
So actually, this was a very, very important thing in Canada as well, because many of the Canadian dermatologists were actually leaders in trying to regulate sun tanning bed usage. Dr. Shell Rosen in Toronto was one of those as part of the Sun Awareness Group here in Canada. And we know that UV radiation is a carcinogen. It's been shown, it's been studied. We know that is a fact. So the whole notion and the idea of getting a base tan before you go so that you don't burn, it's just wrong on so many levels. There is no such thing as a healthy tan. So we strongly, strongly, strongly discourage anyone from really using any tanning beds, tanning salons. Fake tanner, go for it. Knock yourself out.
Yeah.
But true exposure to UV radiation, that in of itself, you're exposing yourself, you're increasing your risk of developing skin cancer, even if it was just one time. This is not to be kind of a like a very paternalistic, like, don't do this. At the end of the day, we just care. We know that the science is there, and we want to make sure that everyone has the knowledge so that they can make informed decisions about their own healthcare and about their own skin health. We know, we've seen patients, young patients even, it's not, like I said, sun does discriminate and it doesn't. It just because you're young and healthy, 25, 28-year-old does not mean you're not someone who can develop a melanoma. It certainly happens, and I've certainly seen it.
I guess it trends as well, going to tanning salons towards the younger demographic, and so that's definitely something to keep in mind.
Totally. Sure. And it's interesting because, like I said, I think when I was much younger, when I was like, as if I'm that much older, but when I was 16, back in my day, I remember all of my friends, like, they were all going tanning, and now you would not like catch any of them dead. And I think a lot of that is just because we know more.
Right.
So culturally, I do see a positive shift in the mindset of most teens, adolescents, younger adults, and even older adults. And I think that's great. And I think programs like this with RCI Science are awesome because they allow people to kind of get a better understanding of what's real and what's not, and what's the pseudoscience that's out there.
Yeah. That's really promising. We're getting better. There's progress to be made.
We can always do better. We can always do better. Like, like you can always improve. But we are heading, I think, in somewhat of a right direction.
That's good. That's good too. So what is the connection then between like suntans, sunburns, and then skin cancer?
This comes up a lot of times with patients. And a tan in and of itself is skin damage. So that is your own skin cells saying, oh gosh, we're getting a bit too much UV radiation right now. So we try to protect ourselves, whether it's a mild suntan versus a blistering sunburn. It's all damage. And for many of the skin cancers that I've mentioned, melanoma, basal cell, squamous cell carcinoma, it depends on the type of exposure you have, whether it's your cumulative sun exposure risk, as we've seen in squamous cell carcinoma, so kind of throughout your lifetime, versus kind of intermittent bursts of sun damage for the people who just during the summer, they always get a burn, for melanoma and basal cell carcinoma that we worry a bit more about. tan used to be the hot thing to do, you know? I think more and more people are just so much more aware of how important it is to take care of our skin, not just from a skin cancer perspective, but from a photo aging perspective. I think like the more pale is in. Like some patients are just tell me how much they hate being pale, and I say no, like live up to it, man. It's great.
What does that mean for someone who tans really easily but maybe doesn't burn as often?
Just because you don't burn does not mean that you are never going to be at risk of developing skin cancer in the future. I think that is also a very common misconception, and it's one of the reasons people stay away from sunscreen or from being as diligent with sun protection, because you hear it all the time, oh, I never burn, I just get a nice tan. But I think that's a false sense of security. Like I said, you know, even the most minimal of a tan is an indication of skin and cell damage, and ultimately over time that damage can accumulate and you can be left with some form of skin cancer. And so many people don't know, but although it's uncommon and it's much less likely, but we definitely see patients who are in a darker skin type, our Black patients, our Asian, our Hispanic patients, who will develop skin cancer. Although it's uncommon, it does happen. So that's why I said when at the beginning you asked me, you know, does the sun discriminate? In part, yes, and in part, no. So everyone in the end can benefit from daily sun protection, and I really do mean daily. Rain or shine, winter, summer, spring, fall, does not matter. It would always be important to wear your sunscreen or sun protective clothing.
Okay. Yes, that's really good to know. I'm guilty of being I don't really burn. So it makes it hard to be diligent. But yeah, you're right. It is something that we should be more diligent about every day.
Thanks for tuning in, and thank you so much, Dr. Danny Mansour, for chatting with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what you'd like to see us tackle next. Until next time, don't believe everything you read on the internet.